You introduce this one.
Okay. Hey guys, welcome back to Telltale. I'm Emily.
I'm Greg.
And today we are going to be discussing the book Bones and Keeps by Dena, Bain, Taylor. Is that how you... Dena? If I slaughtered your name,
Dena?
I'm sorry. But...
D-E-N-A.
Yeah, D-E-N-A.
I think Dena's pretty safe.
Could be Dana. I don't know. It's hard with European names or whatever. So anyway.
And we'll also be discussing her hat.
My hat. Feathers. I did not kill this bird.
No, it looks fake.
No, they're real.
Really?
I guess. I did find this at a thrift store, so I don't know for sure. Anyway.
Okay.
So
they look too black.
They probably died.
Okay.
They usually do that these days. And those days. And all the days. Anyway. Bones and Keeps.
Mm-hmm.
We both have very opposing views of this one. I was super excited after I read this to discuss it, and then I saw your review on Goodreads. I was like, well, I guess turning this into a top tale is not gonna happen.
No. I mean, defend it.
All right. Anyway, so I'll give you the synopsis, and then we'll kind of go into there were some things we definitely agreed on, but first, here's the synopsis. It's a couple decades after Beowulf killed Grendel. He is now king of his keep, and one day, one of the islands that he protects highly because it holds his most sacred treasure, ends up having a woman and her crew, which was unusual for its time, kind of washed up on shore, and then they slaughtered all the men and then took the woman because she was clearly the captain and went for questioning, and she ends up being wrapped into Beowulf's life because Beowulf fully believes in fates and having, a destiny and all this kind of stuff, and she just believes in luck. But she's kind of swept into this whole big family feud chaos when Beowulf's witch queen sister kind of has this prophecy that could go either way. Either you're going to lose all of your heirs and your kingdom and everything, and you're going to have to follow your, this prophecy, and maybe it'll turn out okay, we don't know. And it involves, some gods and things like that he has to be bound to, and all these, prerequisites, basically, of what he has to do in order for this to be accomplished in his favor. And so he's kind of pursuing it in hopes of having it accomplished in his favor, but it kind of gets this woman ends up being Egyptian kind of wrapped up into it, where she's actually part of the prophecy, and she hates it, and it's terrible, and there's some wars and a lot of people. It's a very manly book, in my opinion. Actually, I really enjoyed it too, but it's really well researched, actually. If you having knowledge of kind of Northland mythologies definitely helps when reading this book. I was very impressed as I read through it. First, it was a little slow starting, but once I got to maybe about the third chapter, it started getting good. So, it was a little bit, give it a little time when you start reading it, but once you get into it, it starts there are so many twists in here that were so, intentional and well thought out. I was very impressed with it. But yeah, I don't want to give too much away, because there are so many great, twists and turns. There's some really great humor. There's some really great serious parts. There's nice romances. There's danger. I thought the hunting scenes were super poetic and really well done. Even the battle scenes were kind of emulated in a very similar way to what we saw in the Iliad and the Odyssey for me. There was a lot of name dropping, but everybody whose name was dropped was significant, and their death was significant.
Was there a lot of blood and disemboweling and
yes,
body parts flying?
There was. People getting their arms lobbed off. Yeah, it was very... At least the version of the Iliad that I read, it was very similarly done. So the language was very familiar to me. There was
any
no
rosy-fingered dogs?
No, there was the old woman. The moon kept on being referred to as the old woman.
Oh, no.
So, I mean, instead of rosy-fingered dawn, you have the old woman rising. So, yeah. Or gazing upon the earth, that kind of stuff. So, I felt like there was some similarities to how those were written. And I felt they were really well done. I loved reading the hunting scenes, though.
Okay.
Because the way, Beowulf and his companions kind of portray the sacredness of the hunt was really, really interesting. You get a really good sense of basically how their lifestyle emulates their religion so closely. Like, everything they do, like, all their holidays were well researched and well, like, portrayed. There were some places, but very few places, where you could say that the author took creative liberties.
Mm-hmm.
But I just felt like having a bit of, like, this Norse and Northern, like, background in, like, their folklore and things like that helped me considerably get through this.
Okay.
There was a lot of name dropping that was hard to keep track of for, like, secondary characters. I was able to keep track of the main characters, or, like, predominant characters. But I also realized that a lot of the people mentioned, usually it was because they died, and usually because their death was significant. Like, they were some kind of great warrior that was finally, like, defeated, or they were, like, some king's head thane or whatever, who had been killed, or, like, people who were namers and various sorts of mystics who ended up being, you know, ended or were brought in as part of the whole prophecy and things like that. So it was very complex. It was well written. The dialogue was... I mean, you have this really warlike grunting guy. You know, Beowulf. Where he's very matter-of-fact and tells a lot of, like, the old tales of different gods and goddesses and stuff. And then you have this Egyptian who's just like, I don't give a shit. Like, none of your gods are my gods. Okay. So, I mean, there was kind of, like, a bit of humor to that where she literally would be like, I don't care. I really don't. Or, like, she just, like, fade out or whatever. But I also felt like a lot of the folklore, if you didn't have a background, was explained well enough in the different stories that Beowulf and his, like, thanes and stuff would tell throughout the story, that you got an idea of who these gods and goddesses were, and who these, you know, beings of myth were. So I felt like it gave you just enough that you knew kind of what was going on, but it didn't give you the full dynamic that knowing the actual myths would have given you.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought it was really good.
Okay.
I liked it.
Okay. And then there's me. I went into this really excited to read it. I read Beowulf first, the J.R.R. Tolkien translation of it, to refresh my memory, because it's been many years since I read it. And when I did read it, I read a poem version of it that was in Old English and was cool, but has faded in my memory. And so I wanted to refresh my memory of the whole story of Beowulf. And but this book fills in a period after Beowulf gains his kingdom and before he fights the dragon, which the original tale just kind of passes over. Doesn't really tell you too much what's going on. So it was cool that Taylor chose to fill that in, because that was ripe for somebody going in there and telling that backstory, since the original tale just kind of skipped over it. So I was excited to do it, but I didn't get very far. So I DNF'd this, and I have good reasons why. So anyway, a lot of what Emily's talking about, I never read and have no clue about, because I didn't get past chapter 2. Yeah,
one more chapter and it would have started picking up. One more chapter.
Except, I love the type. I love this illustration. But first of all, $40 for soft cover. I can get hardcovers signed from Barnes & Noble for $28. Very thick book.
Very.
Weighs a ton.
Very floppy, too. That was one of the critiques I gave it, where it didn't meet 5 stars for me.
Yeah.
Because I did find it very frustrating. When you're enthralled in a story, you don't want to have to put it down because your wrists are tired.
Right.
From holding it so tightly. Like, I felt like I was starting to get carpal tunnel, because this book, I mean, I'm gonna flop it around a bit. I apologize.
Go ahead.
Like, it's really a floppy book. Like, once you start getting, like, into these thinner chapters, like, at the beginning and end, you have a little more stability towards the middle because you have the pages holding it. But when you're at the beginning, I read in my bed. This is, like, falling all over me.
I read like that, too.
Yeah.
And it was taking more arm strength than I feel I have to open the book wide enough to be, because, and you probably can't see this in the camera, I'll have to superimpose some close-up shots.
Your gutters and margins are a little small.
Well, the type is a pretty large print. I would call that 14 point, which is large print.
It's 12 or larger.
It's definitely bigger than 12.
Average body copy should be 11 point font.
Yeah.
At most.
And I thought that was going to make this a quick read because it's, okay, it's a lot of pages, but man, it's a colossal font. But long lines that run very tight into the gutter of the book. So you have to really wrench this thing open to be reading these lines.
Yes.
Long lines, and they're double spaced.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a lot of space in this
type
book.
On something like 24-point leading, which, if we're graphic designers, we know what that means. This stuff, it's hard to look at.
Yes.
It's hard to follow the lines. It's hard to read the lines.
And then on top of that, you've got this weight that you're dealing with.
Yeah.
I don't have weak wrists. I'm a pretty strong girl.
Yeah.
I'll own that. I'm not the delicate flower I appear to be.
Yeah, but when you're in these,
you're holding this
pages,
thing,
it's hard to hold.
Yes, and it's
My
very.
hand is cramping up just with a little bit. I'm holding it right now.
Yes, and I think one of the things that people who are doing indie publishing need to focus on is making sure that user experience is just as good as the writing. In my opinion, this book deserved to be a hardcover. I enjoyed the writing, the story itself enough that I felt like... Or smaller.
Joel Byer's book, which doesn't go so far into the gutter, has little smaller point size and tighter lines, but that makes it easier to read.
Yes. So there were some design things. Part of me can see that the rationale being there's some really cool illustrations in here.
Yeah.
Like some of the chapters and stuff at the beginning have these really nice illustrations that I feel if this book had been made in this size, even if it was split into two, because technically at a certain point it calls itself Book 2, where it's like the second half of the book.
No, but you know what?
And it's like, here it is.
Just tighten up that leading to something more reasonable.
Yeah.
And you would cut probably 50 pages out of this book.
Yeah,
at least.
This is the half point in this book. This is where it switches from...
reduce the cost of printing, reduce the price for the customer, make it easier to read, make it easier to hold, make the book lighter. I mean, just so many benefits from simple graphic design. And
you would not have lost anything in these illustrations. These illustrations are really nice.
They are.
Clean, stark, beautiful graphics.
Yeah, the illustrator did a wonderful job.
They did a lovely job with this, and I felt like I did like the typeface a lot that they used in the body copy as well as in the chapter headers and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I really enjoyed a lot of those things. I felt like they certainly added to the story. They kind of gave you a sense of foreshadowing. So design-wise, that was great. I felt like just simple things like making the type a little smaller, letting a little smaller, maybe even making the book a little smaller, because you wouldn't have to change a lot of the size of these images if the book was maybe even like 1.5 inches smaller on each edge. You wouldn't have lost anything graphically for that. So I ended up, the story was a 5-star story to me. The book knocked it down a star.
For me, just
from design.
It was so much struggle to start reading this book.
Yes.
I was fighting with the book. I was fighting with the way it was printed. And when I read those first 2 chapters, now, you mentioned there's a lot of names thrown out. And in the first 2 chapters, I'm getting all these names thrown at me without any explanation. When we read the Iliad, we were getting a huge, huge number of different characters. But Homer would stop and give their backstory, even if they got killed on the next page. Yes. But you learned why that person was being thrown at you.
Yes.
In this, I didn't. I was just getting all these names, and they were all just getting confused, and I was struggling with the physicality of the book. And after the second chapter, I threw it on the table and said, no more.
Yeah.
This is just awful.
That was...
I'm not this isn't a textbook. I'm not reading this to get a degree.
No.
I'm reading this for enjoyment, and I was not enjoying it one little bit.
Yeah, user experience is a huge part of it. Like, I really enjoyed the story, but it was frustrating to constantly have to set this down. And give my hands a rest.
Yeah.
I didn't want to, because I was enjoying the story. I was enjoying the adventures. I was enjoying the poetry. I was enjoying all of that. But to constantly have to set this down because my hands were tired was a huge downside for me.
Yeah.
So I think there were some very simple things that could have been done to make this a much more enjoyable user experience that does the story justice, in my opinion. Also, one of the things I did actually appreciate, I did reference this a lot at the beginning, the family trees and stuff, so I could keep track of...
And they got a map.
Yes, and a map!
Gotta have a map.
Yes. There was a lot of research that went into this.
There was.
And I definitely appreciated that in the story.
And I think the author's done a grave injustice by the printing of this book. It probably would have been a lot more enjoyable if I didn't have to fight with the physicality of this book.
Yes. So I think if you have a chance to do a second edition, please consider user experience
hire us to design it. We'll do a great job. We won't cost that much.
We'll make sure that
she will, but I won't. I'm cheap.
I don't know. I don't know about that. But yeah, you could do better justice. Like, we even did that with Critical Mass when we reviewed Critical Mass. The cover of that book did not give the contents justice. I feel like the design of this book, because like all these illustrations and stuff, there are ways to make this a hardcover. There are ways to make this smaller and still do justice to all this beautiful artwork and still do justice to the story. And, like, people who like Beowulf, people who like to collect these old Norse myths, people who like that kind of thing, would pay a good amount of money for a really nice collector's edition of this in a hardcover.
Yeah.
No problem. Even if you split it into 2 books in a box set and hardcover, a little bit smaller, you'd have a really marketable product.
Yeah, but for this, I would lower the price point down to, like, $19.95.
Yeah. I understand... I would talk to whoever you have as a distributor or whoever you have as a printer and see if you can get a better deal on printing, because sometimes that's why people inflate the prices, because they're getting gouged. Because they're, doing limited editions and small covers and stuff. So
what did I pay for this? I can't remember what I paid for Joe. Well, I didn't. I paid for one of them. One of them they sent us. But I bought a second copy off Amazon. I can't remember what I paid, but it definitely wasn't over $20. That was $40.
Yeah, there are some things you could have done here. Though I have to say, for like an older person, the big type isn't that bad. But my mom with cataracts could read this fine.
No, still.
But the leading is still really difficult.
To keep your eyes
it's exhausting.
Following the lines, you need that leading to be tighter. That's just basic typesetting.
Yep. The human eye doesn't need to travel that much. It does give you a lot of fatigue. So
yeah, shorter lines, tighter leading. Same font size would be fine, but you would find yourself with fewer pages, less weight, smaller book, and a better user experience, and people might actually then push through and enjoy the whole story.
Yeah. I pushed through despite all of it, and it's worth making the holistic experience a better experience. Like, this piece of work is great. Like, the story itself, I will recommend this book. Like, I'll recommend it because I really enjoyed this story. This was a really great piece of literature.
Is that available as an ebook?
I don't know.
If it's available for Kindle, get it that way.
Because because fighting this book is a little rough.
Size and stuff. You can get around all the problems that I had with this and enjoy the story that way.
I mean, I don't know that you'll have
well,
as good of an issue. Yeah, the inline
which they
images.
mostly are. You can do that.
Yeah, they're already kind of done like that.
As long as you don't try to wrap around the
illustrations. I'd give this as a tattoo. I like the tree with the tiny... You probably can't see it from there, but this is cool. Chapter 16. If y'all look at Chapter 16 when you check out the book, that's going to be my next tattoo. Anyway, My first tattoo. I don't know. I'll probably never get tattooed. But anyway, yes. I'm going to sound like a broken record. This book is a great piece of literature. It really deserves to be better designed.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm going to...
And for me, I gave it 1 star because it just wasn't worth fighting.
Mm-hmm.
At least not the first 2 chapters. I was not able to get engaged enough in the story to keep going.
Yep.
So I bailed.
And you gotta do what you gotta do. Like, literature is so subjective. Like, if you feel like you're fighting to finish a story, you don't have to finish it. I'm stubborn, and I had feelings that this was gonna build really well, and I got through it, and I did not regret reading it. I regretted...
But it took you longer to read this than
it did.
Anything else we have
to be
done
fair,
so far.
It took me a long time because I had a kidney infection knock me on my ass for a whole week, though.
Okay.
So I did a lot more sleeping. But again, with the fatigue of that kidney infection, people love reading when they're ill. I couldn't set this on me or hold it to save my life because I was so fatigued. Again, that's part of user experience. If you want people to enjoy the reading experience, you've got to make it easy to navigate.
Yeah, hire us as your graphic designers. We'll do an awesome job.
We'll make sure all integrity is preserved. And we give you a book that does it justice. But yeah,
book won't suck. The story will be as good as the author made it.
Yes, all of this research that went into this to make this such a great story, all the twists and turns, all of the it's so thoughtful. The world building is great. And the historical accuracy, the very few places artistic license was taken, it's just so well put together and so thoughtful of a piece of literature. It's a shame that the design was not also as thoughtful. All right, I'm done sounding like a broken record. Okay. Because I can't express enough how much I enjoyed the story, but how disappointed I am with.
So I think you got one recommendation from her, and you got me saying, just go read Heinlein. That's what I did.
To each their own. But yeah, so that's all I have. Anything else?
No.
All right, well... Thanks, guys, for watching. We will see you next time. Like and subscribe, and also feel free to recommend books. We love taking recommendations. We'll try anything. As you can see, we'll give it a good effort to get through something, and sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. So let us know, and we will see you next time. Bye.